Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have some things to discuss. First things first, just want to thank all the new subscribers. I know I mentioned it at the top of every episode, but I really do appreciate it. I know I've had a lot of new people join over the past few weeks as I've had some, episodes that are really doing well, and I really do appreciate all the support. As always, if you are not currently subscribed, if you could do me a favor and drop one down in the bottom. About 80% of the people that watch these videos are not currently subscribed, so anything you could do I really appreciate. Additionally, I am a part of the Believe Podcast Network, so you can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and just as a heads up, if you do hear any ads, it's because I'm a part of that network, and anything you could do to help those sponsors really does help me out. Just got one final thing that I want to say. This is episode 100. For those of you that have been with me along the way, I really do appreciate it. I am hoping to try to get some things planned for you guys. I have a couple of episodes and some guests planned for later on in the summer. I'm still trying to work out that big guest that we talked about. I believe he's actually currently at SEC Media Days. But I really hope that I can get that all sorted out. But I just want to thank everyone that's been here along this journey. It's been a wild ride over the past couple, year and a half. But I really do appreciate everyone who has followed along every step of the way. I will continue to put out 2 episodes a week. For anybody that's unaware, these episodes are going to continue through the season, football and basketball content, previews and breakdowns of every game. I'm also going to have a full-length, single-episode breakdown of Alabama's football season. I'm probably going to be shooting that next week, at the end of the week. So just a heads up for that, because I am going to be going out of town, so I'm going to try to see if I can shoot that maybe on Wednesday, so that I can put that out at the end of next week to give everyone an idea of expectations and just a single video breakdown of this is what my thoughts are as it relates to Alabama football for next season, from position groups to scores to everything that you need to know. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and subscribe. Of course, the Alabama basketball content will not be stopping. This has just been a fairly slow week, especially with SEC Media Days for football going on. So we will pick up the basketball content as soon as there is more available. Let's get right into the show. So, first things first, as I mentioned at the top, Alabama took on SEC Media Days. As I previously mentioned, Kalen DeBoer was there. He was joined by Caden Proctor. He was joined by Tim Keenan. He was joined by Deontay Lawson. I thought that all 3 players had some really good things to say. I thought that, they really conducted themselves in the way that you would expect upperclassmen and leaders on the team to conduct themselves. If you've heard any of them speak, it was kind of more the same from that, right? I do think that all 3 players are going to be permanent captains. Deontay Lawson being, Kalen DeBoer even mentioned, he's the lone returning captain from last season. And the fact that he is back this season and is there for SEC Media Days tells you what his players or what his teammates think of him and what he thinks of his teammates. The fact that he, returned, obviously coming back from injury, but the fact that he's there really tells you what that team thinks of him. There was a lot also made about Tim Keenan being the spiritual leader on the team. I know last season he also was given the award, was one of the guys given the award for the religious spiritual side of the team that they give out at Calvary that I was at. I did a video on that last summer. If you haven't, been a part of it, you might want to watch that. I know Ty Simpson also got that award as well. So these are, this is a team that is led, not just from a brothership and partnership perspective on the football field, but they are, a fairly tight brotherhood from a spiritual component as well. As a fairly, I don't want to say super religious team, but they definitely have that component that's kind of an underlying element that a lot of the guys do believe. Additional thing, one of the funnier moments that kind of came up, again, when we're just talking about the players and some of the things that were said, Caden Proctor was asked about his cologne collection. And it was something that I was actually completely unaware of. But apparently Caden Proctor has about 170 bottles of cologne based on what he said. And his thought process was, he said he started it back in 8th grade, and it's, he wanted to kind of end the stigma of big guys have to smell. So he's like, as a big guy, I don't ever want to smell. So I have all the cologne so that I always stay smelling fresh. I thought it was kind of funny. I thought that you saw a little bit of somebody's personality. That's what sometimes you don't always get out of media days. I think if reporters do a good job of asking questions, it definitely helps. But sometimes media days are a kind of semi-polished event that, getting the truth you're going to get some of the truth, right? But at the end of the day, these answers, these people have been media trained, whether they be players, coaches, etc. They have been media trained as to what to say, what not to say. And there is a level of, not going too deep into answers that happens at an event like this because they know every reporter in the country is going to be there. So I did think that was really funny when they mentioned that. Multiple of the players, especially on defense, I don't think Caden Proctor was specifically asked about it, but I know Tim Keenan and Deontay Lawson were both asked about Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback at Florida State, his comments regarding that game. It's going to be upcoming, and they both, said some variation of it's going to be taken care of. The comments will be taken care of on the field. The disrespect will be taken care of on the field. It really sounds like Alabama's, going with a business means business. Like, we'll take care of this, on the football field. We're not going to talk the talk. We're just going to, do what we need to do, and we're going to move on with our day. I will say it was a little funny that Castellanos, in a video here recently, seemed to, I don't want to say walk it back, but seemed to kind of almost take some heat off of that, where he was saying, those boys only went 2-10 last season. I got to fire them up. I also thought it was just really funny as somebody who paid a lot of attention to college football last season. Castellanos was not the big bad elite quarterback at Boston College that he's portraying himself to be, tearing up the ACC. So specifically talking the talk that he's talking, he's talking as if he's some elite transfer that was just an absolute animal, transferring from a lower division up to a higher division and like, I'm going to keep it rolling. He was literally in the same conference last season and was an okay quarterback, but it wasn't like he was an elite quarterback. So that's a big thing where it's like, I'm not exactly sure that the message that he's trying to get, if he really is just trying to hype up his guys, I'm not sure that's the message that's getting out, because anyone who has seen him on the field or, is looking at it like, sure, okay, yeah, if that's what you want to say, that's what you want to say. But it just really felt, disingenuous. It also was, like I said, very funny to me that he walked it back. I know Paul Feinbaum and some others have said that they just don't think this is going to be a competitive game. I'm of that mindset, right? I'm of the mindset that Florida State, even without the comments, Florida State was not as prepared for the Alabama team as Alabama is going to be prepared for Florida State. If we go to something that Kalen DeBoer said, and not trying to jump too far ahead, but Kalen DeBoer specifically was asked about his thoughts of, did his season 1 live up to the Alabama standard? And he straight up just said no, right? It took him a minute to get to it, right? He was like, there were things that we did that were, but obviously we didn't make the playoffs, so that isn't living up to that standard. And so, but when you think about something like that, when you think about the fact that Alabama, had a good season but did not live up to its standard, then Alabama is got something to prove, right? They have that chip on their shoulder. You have a guy like Ty Simpson that's proving that, hey, I am the quarterback that is going to lead this team. You have other guys that, a Deontay Lawson that comes back to, again, prove, hey, this is why I came back. Tim Keen, all these guys that, like, in some cases we're going to be fringe NFL draft picks or fringe, level NFL draft picks. These guys come back and they all are playing for one common goal. And that common goal is to prove what they can do as it relates to, making the college football playoff and potentially trying to win the college football playoff. When Florida State is the first team on that type of schedule, it reminds me of a Nick Saban team where it's like, we don't care who the first, who the team is. You're first on the schedule. You're the one that's getting checked off first, right? So immediately that first team, you're going to be fired up, and that's the one that you expect them to have, some of the most fire and ready for, because that is game one on a thing where you didn't achieve your best, so now you have to prove it to everyone else. So I immediately thought that Alabama was going to have that fire, but then you back that up with a quarterback of that team giving them the bulletin board material, right? Giving them the material of, they don't have Nick Saban to Salem, or, I'm going to run through them like this, or I'm going to do that, or whatever, right? That immediately, in my opinion, just put the nail in the coffin, right? there was the possibility that Alabama was going to do that no matter what, just because, again, they were first on the schedule and you're next kind of situation. However, when you have a guy like Thomas Castellanos that is having this, that's making these comments and almost provoking the team, then of course, right? Like, I fully expect Alabama to absolutely dominate Florida State. I expect this to be a situation of similar to the Vandy linebacker that said, Alabama, you're next, a few years ago, and then Vandy gets absolutely dog walked. I honestly expect that to be what happens. A lot of old takes exposed happening after this game. I really don't think it's going to be close. I don't think Florida State has the horses to hang with Alabama. Obviously, they've tried to replace. They've done some changes trying to replace their offensive coordinator with Gus Malzahn and bringing in other players, but I really just don't think they're going to have the guys to hang with Alabama. So I think Alabama's going to have a lot to prove, and I really do expect Alabama dominates that first game. So, Tim Keenan, Deontay Lawson, we're both asked about that. Deontay Lawson, a lot of his questions stemmed around his injury and how tough that's been, and I thought that his answers were very, very good. It was kind of what you would expect. He's been working hard trying to get back. He gave a lot of shout outs to the medical staff at the university and everyone that's kind of been pushing him, and also allowed him to realize, I really need to focus on everything that I can, because there is a possibility that this could all be gone in the blink of an eye. He said that's something that his injury, kind of told him. Then when you potentially go to a guy like Caden Proctor, and this is one of the last ones that I'll mention, Kalen DeBoer specifically also said that he wanted to give a shout out to Caden Proctor because he was taking 16 hours over the summer and going to be able to graduate in 3 years, and noted that he was doing it with a 3.7 GPA, and that included the short stint that he transferred back to Iowa, which obviously complicates things. So the fact that Caden Proctor is still going to be able to graduate in the time frame that he's able to graduate in with a 3.7 GPA and kind of be at that level, the implications being that he's going to be able to go to the NFL after this season, but he would always already have his degree, was something that I thought that was very, very cool and was a big thing for Kalen DeBoer to mention. Then Kalen DeBoer took the stand. He had a really, really good opening statement. His opening statement, a lot of it was thanking Greg Sankey and Greg Byrne and the administration and the players, especially the captains that were on staff. From a Sankey and Greg Byrne perspective, he talked about, him being the first, this being his first time in the SEC. Sankey had done a really, really good job, making sure the coaches had whatever they needed, making sure that everyone was aware of how the different changes were going to be taking place, how the different rule changes, or anything like that. I thought that, he obviously gave them their props. He talked to Greg, mentioning that Greg Byrne and everyone on the university side had done a really good job kind of supporting him, and just gave the shout out to them that they deserved. Then when he started talking more about specifics as it relates to the team, he talked about how opening practice is not going to happen until about 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from today, I believe he said. So I'm recording this on Wednesday afternoon. So 2 weeks. So at the very end of July is when opening practice is going to happen. Additionally, he talked about the fact that he thought that, again, everybody is doing things the right way. That's what it kept over and over saying, is that we know we didn't achieve our goal, but even though we didn't achieve our goal, everyone is doing the things in the right way and the way that they should be done to be able to achieve that goal in the future. And so a lot of it was kind of focused on that. He, really kind of emphasized that he thought that everyone was doing their job, and everyone was doing it in the way that they're supposed to be doing it. Kalen DeBoer was then asked a little bit about, and one of the ones that I kind of wanted to highlight, he was asked about Ryan Grubb. Obviously, originally thinking that Ryan Grubb and Charles Huff were going to be coming with him to Alabama, and then all of a sudden Grubb and then Huff take jobs with the Seattle Seahawks. He was asked about that and the specificity to that. And, he talked about it being a bittersweet feeling. Obviously, you're very happy for a guy that you've known for many, many years to be able to get a job to coach in the NFL. You're happy for that possibility for him and that additional career growth for him. However, you're sad because you know that he could do great things with you on campus at Alabama. That's the reason you offered him the job in the first place. And so he talked about how having Grubb back does, help him in a way that he thinks that, not to say that Sheridan was bad at his job in any way, but that having Grubb back he thinks is going to be good. And obviously, they've worked well together over the course of the past, quite a few years. So he thought that Grubb being back with him was going to be a very big deal for the offense. He again reiterated that if the game were to be played today, that Ty Simpson would be your starting quarterback. He made sure to note, and I know Caden Proctor also noted when asked about the quarterback battle, that all three guys have talent and all three guys have a level where they can all do things very, very well, but they're all, a work in progress, but not in a bad way. A work in progress is in, hey, he's told them, you can't stay stagnant. If the game was going to be played today, yes, Ty Simpson's our starting quarterback, but every single one of you have the ability to play to your potential. And if you play to your potential, then we will see what happens, right? But as of now, Ty Simpson is your starting quarterback. That's something that we have said many, many times. I fully expect Ty to be your starter. I know I've talked a lot about it on this show. I expect Ty to be your starter. I think personally Ty plays well enough to make his way to the NFL draft and that you get Keelan Russell next season. So that's personally where I stand as it relates to the quarterback battle. Kalen DeBoer didn't go into obviously that much depth, but he did specifically mention that Ty would be your starting quarterback if the season were to start today. Some of the other things that I thought, he just kind of finished up with was, again, when you're looking at what Alabama has done well, he mentioned that Alabama he thought that last season, when you transition from a guy like Nick Saban, you're worried about buy-in to a degree. You're worried about, maintaining culture. You're worried about so many different things, right? Because Alabama had obviously an elite program when Saban was here. So he was asked a little bit about that. And the way that he specifically referred to it is, we'll go to like him bringing Saban. He said the reason that obviously Saban came is he felt like having the recruits be able to meet Saban was almost like giving people he said it like a present almost, but having, these recruits be able to meet somebody that obviously I'm sure that they idolized, some of which had met him. I don't believe all of them had. But, Saban was willing to do so. He specifically didn't mention it, but I do know another reason was because him and his staff were at Keelan Russell's sister's funeral. So with Nick Saban being on campus already or in Tuscaloosa already for the Nick's Kids Foundation event that they had going on, Nick was able to step over and assist. And obviously that is a special thing that you can show, recruits of, hey, he can talk about the dominance, and anybody that's ever been in this state or, around college football over the past 17 years, the kind of gravitas that Nick Saban has. The additional thing that Kalen DeBoer talked about is he was specifically, and we're going more into the culture side, he was specifically asked about, hey, how are you able to keep guys from going into the portal, right? A lot was said about how Alabama didn't lose a single guy in the spring portal. And he talked about it being mostly as it relates to culture, right? The fact that the guys have officially bought into what him and his system does, and that's something that we talked about, right? We talked about it was a very big deal that these players had now committed to Kalen DeBoer and his staff on over 3 separate occasions, right? The transfer portal had opened 3 times, and they had stayed on all 3 times. So any player that's currently still on the roster at the University of Alabama wants to be on Kalen DeBoer's roster. They weren't there because they thought, oh, he's going to be able to be Nick Saban, or oh, he's going to do this. No, you've played for him for an entire season. You know exactly what he's like on the field. You know what he's like during summer practice. You know what he's like during fall camp. It's been a full season, right? So that was a big thing that he kind of talked about as, he has been able to build a culture, and that culture is the guys wanting to, be able to recruit for each other, right? I know Tim Keenan talked about grilling out for some of the recruits, and them treating it like a brotherhood. So the players that are actively on the roster, helping recruit the players trying to get, the Alabama's trying to get onto the roster. And then everything that goes with that. Again, whether it be, how they conduct practice, how they, speak to each other, whatever, right? Like the culture is the day-to-day operations. It's not just what happens on the football field. And he thought that a lot of that was the reason why, guys didn't leave, right? And again, that's something that we have talked about. I believe that very confidently. I think that Kalen DeBoer has done a great job continuing to build the Alabama brand into what it is. I thought that Alabama, and everything that he did in this SEC media days, I thought that Kalen DeBoer, conducted himself as well as we could have expected. I thought that all of his answers to the questions were great. I thought that nobody really tried to trip him up too much, but I thought that overall it was what you would expect out of a media day event. Again, if you were expecting to get some hard-hitting, crazy question, that's just not what these events are. These events are really, coaches that have been trained on, hey, these are the type answers that we're kind of looking for. This is what our expectation is for next season. And, they're kind of to a degree media trained on, hey, this is the, I don't want to say agenda, but this is the notion that you need to put out for everyone, because they know that, again, every reporter in the entire Southeast is going to be here, right? So in my mind, it was exactly what I expected media days to be. I do think that there were some good things that were said. I think there were some things that we can take out of media days. I think that there's some things that you definitely can look at and be like, hey, this is something that was pointed out. But again, I don't think that if you're going to SEC media days for hot takes from the coaches or players, that's just not realistic on generally what you're going to see from the University of Alabama at a minimum. Now, some other schools you may hear some like semi-hot takes or whatever, but a lot of these schools are going to give kind of their bulletin board material, and that's what they're going to talk about, because that's what SEC Media Days is all about. I know there wasn't a ton of like super hard-hitting information, but I just wanted to cover it for anybody that may have missed it. As always, if you are interested, I will actually link it down in the bottom. But the University of Alabama's YouTube page, the Alabama Athletics YouTube page, they posted Tim Keenan, Caden Proctor, Deontay Lawson, and Kalen DeBoer's comments at SEC Media Days. All the players spoke for about 10 minutes apiece, and then Kalen DeBoer spoke for about 30 minutes. So if you are interested, I will link them all in the bottom. I do think that they all are worth a watch. But again, just know what you're expecting when you go into something like this. Don't expect, a podcast interview. Expect, somebody that's, giving a media polished answer, and to a degree answering the question that they want to have been asked, but in some cases weren't exactly asked. I think that it was a really, really good media days. I thought that, Alabama represented themselves very well, and, I'm happy to cover it. Hopefully I'll have a little bit more hard-hitting things that we can talk about later on next week. Like I said, I do plan to try to work on getting that interview that I have kind of hinted at a couple of times squared away. As I said, I think the guy's actually at Media Day, so it's been a little difficult getting in touch with his team. But I do have some other people lined up that I know everyone will be very happy to see, especially some of you guys that are very interested in basketball. I have a couple of basketball-specific guests that I already have lined up that I'm very happy about. So if you are interested, please subscribe to the channel. Please follow along for all the content. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.